Hey everyone, and this is my first attempt at making an economic overview. I'm Frank, and I will be taking you through these wild and crazy concepts to help you, the millennial and the Generation Z person, understand the impacts of our current economic situation. I'm going to go over the little overview first. I will be covering a broad spectrum of topics. Just know that if you want me to go into further details about said topics, please leave them in the comments below. I will read them and I will see if I can accommodate your request. Now, spoiler alert. Basically, I will be covering future videos on the topics I will talk about in this video. For example, I will talk about the impact of deindustrialization upon the Midwest. I am planning to do a further, more in-depth video on it. So if you want to see that, that's coming out. You don't even have to put that in the comments. So, yay for you! In all seriousness, this is going to be a little fun, informative video. Think Crash Course, but with little more edgier humor. Meets something like the David Pakman Show-ish, or even Secular Talk with Kyle Kalinske. So, without further ado, let's do this. Deindustrialization. The impacts of deindustrialization upon the West are numerous. For example, during the 1950s, the U.S. was the #1 industrialized nation. We produced everything here. This was a continuous steady stream up until the 70s, and where they had something called stagflation. What stagflation essentially was the fact that businesses were overburdened because they were paying high wages. People had more than a living wage. In 1968, if you adjusted for inflation, the minimum wage was around $10.50, much higher than it is today. However, that created a problem. It de-incentivized giant companies to invest in property and other aspects, because what's the point of investing if you're not going to be able to bring in enough money home from it? This was due to the tax structure, which there's a catch-22 with that tax structure. During that time period, most big companies were getting taxed around 70%. Now the effective tax rate, what they actually paid, was about 50%. So instead of investing in properties and expanding out their business in order to make money, they invested in more workers, more people, and this was there was a giant benefit to that. However, when you're that thinly close on the margin for making money, when something does happen and changes, it's hard to recover. Now, what happened to cause this stagflation? Simple. Oil. In Iran, which was a huge oil producer at the time, we decided, nope, we do not like them having a democratically elected person, so we propped up the Shah, which the Shah was the ruler of Iran from the 50s until about the early 70s. We propped him up via CIA coup. Yeah, that sounds like it'll be something we'll go into further detail later. Yeah, that'll definitely be the subject of a subsequent video. Oh, by the way, little side topic and off track, my video release schedule will be every Tuesday, so be prepared for that, and please subscribe, because I have a lot of student loan debt that must be paid off. So let's get me to 10,000 subscribers, guys! Oh, I'm trying to make this as corny as possible, so please laugh along with this. It's supposed to be funny. Now, what that fact did was it basically created an unstable situation in which oil prices were jacked up, because during the Iran Revolution, in which they went from a completely propped up Western power to the enemy of us, they jacked oil prices up. that was a complete outcome of us meddling in their governmental processes. Now, as a result, our economy suffered. We had a completely oil-based economy and a lot of the excess products of oil, because oil goes into making plastics and everything else. Now, what this really led to was the stagnation effect, in which most businesses were stuck. Enter Reagan. Yeah, this will be another topic for another video, so I'm already getting the schedule out. Now, this led to Reagan. Reagan basically decided to send forth the motion of deindustrialization for our country. He lowered taxes from the ridiculously high percentage, or which was the effective tax rate of what they were paying, which was 50%, down to about, I want to say 35%. Yeah, it was 35%. Now, that did free up a lot of potential revenue because people were spending more and more of it. However, when you free up revenue in that way, it's funded into investments in the company and stock buybacks. So it helped people at the top, not so much at the bottom. Now, after we had Reagan and the first Bush, we had Clinton. This was a really set in motion the effect of deindustrialization. Basically, NAFTA. Yes, NAFTA. The North American Free Trade Agreement, which basically states that we're going to have open free trade borders with everyone in North America, mainly Mexico and Canada. There's other countries included into that are on the North American continent, but those are we are the three main big players for it, us, Canada, and Mexico. Now, as a result of that, a lot of companies, a lot of the manufacturing industries decided, why are we paying these high wages to people? We're a company, we're not a charity. Our only goal is to make profit. Let's go make more profit in Mexico where we can pay our workers less. Now, that happened in the 90s. And the wave of that happening, of industry leaving the US basically to out of the Midwest, causes a huge effect. This is evident if you've ever been anywhere in the Midwest. We're talking Ohio, Michigan, parts of Wisconsin, certain parts of Illinois and Iowa, and even Pennsylvania. You can see these hollowed out towns that are set up to hold more people, but no one's there anymore. Why? Business left. Industry's gone. I mean, the prime example of this, the poster child of deindustrialization in the Midwest, is Detroit. Detroit at its height had over 1 million people. It's nowhere near that anymore. And most of Detroit's a ghost town. That's what happens because there's no economic advantage for the industry to stay there. And what does that do with the impact of the country? Well, the Midwest used to be the bellwether region to keep. It was the way that most on the political spectrum, the people on the left stay connected to the working class. That's unions. Unions were the main connection for them. But since they're gone and a lot of the industry left, well, that's open for other political ideologies to infiltrate. And the real impact on that has led to the rampant income inequality you now see in the nation. Most of the money went to the upper classes through Reagan's tax cuts, and most of the money in the middle class left. And what you have is a giant divide in the nation. Now, we've seen that all across the world, except for in certain cases. Germany's the outlier in the whole Western civilization aspect. They have an interesting, and if you really want to see a model that I'm a big proponent of, sorry, I'm handing off my politics here, but it's YouTube. Get used to it. If you don't want to hear about it, don't watch the video. That's all I gotta say to that. But if you really want to see the impact, and that'll probably be a subject of a future video, we can see how Germany kept their manufacturing economy intact. Now, that is the effect on the West. We see a giant income inequality everywhere. It's the haves and the haves not. Now, how does Trump get into all this? Trump ran on this idea that he could win the Midwest. The belt used to be the bellwether and blue Democratic firewall for the Democrats. He did that by basically running as a economic populist. Yes, there was blatant racism and other things in there that was part of why he won the South, but his main pitch and how he won the Midwest was, your jobs aren't leaving. I'm going to make sure they stay. That sounds appealing to an area that has seen that has seen for an entire generation, 25 years since NAFTA. Well, about 25 years, yeah. So have seen the entire economy just get deconstructed, and that's the effect of it. And that's how you get Trump, which, again, I'll go into further detail about that in the subsequent. Now, what rose after deindustrialization in America, the West, everywhere really now? The virtual economy, which is good, bad, and ugly. Now, as I stated previously, businesses are set up to make a profit. They're not charities. That's what a nonprofit organization would be, a charity. Businesses are set up to make a profit. So, they will do this by any legal means necessary. Is there an ethical business? Yes and no. The bigger you get, the bigger most industries get, the less likely they will act ethically due to the simple fact of they're trying to make a profit. And as you get larger, that can be a little more cumbersome and difficult to do because you're dealing with huger labor costs and huger and more laborious regulations and other things you got to deal with. That is, unless you can bank in on what has become the virtual economy. Now, what is this, you ask, Frankie? Simple. You interact with the virtual economy every day. That is YouTube, that's Bitcoin, that's Amazon, that's all those big companies that are on the internet. How do they get around this crazy standard? Simple. Automation and flatlining structures of their businesses. I get it, this is going to be one of those little testimonials of my personal experience, but personal experience, if you bring enough of it together, you can make almost a qualitative analysis of the situation. So here's what I got so far. Basically, with the virtual economy, there are a plethora of industries that have subcontracted and contracted out what used to be their in-house labor. And the most prevalent and telltale example I can present is the case of who will be my future uncle-in-law. He owns his own he's a manufacturer and contractor for rubber and plastic manufacturing throughout the Midwest. He owns his own company for that. He has 2 employees under contract that he is actually in-house business. How does he do that? Simple. He has a virtual office and everything else is subcontracted out, in which he doesn't have to pay them a 401k or pay them for long term. It's just for the length of that set project. And that's the nature of the game now for businesses. No one's doing anything long term. So everything is highly short-sighted. And that brings us to the next topic. What do you do with a population that has no secure business future, job security, gone? What do you do with that? Well, the US hasn't done anything to help this. We have the millennial generation specifically, but could be a little bit of Generation Z. This is where it could apply to some of them, but many millennials, from my perspective, our parents saw, and we witnessed this ourselves, but mainly our parents told us the horror stories of the deindustrialization of the nation. So they discouraged vocational training. Don't become a welder, that job's not going to stay. And they encouraged us going to school and college. Well, student loans. That's how much the student loan crisis. I know many of you in the audience that are millennials and Generation Z know about this. For those of you that aren't part of that, I'll give you a little rundown. Basically, college expenses have increased exponentially because the demand kept going up. So there was more and more colleges started. There was more of an incentive because they were trying to compete for students to go there, differentiate themselves, so that way they can still prove that they're degree had value. Now, what happened was college cost increased because it was a competitive market for trying to get students. That's why most of college expenses go in administration costs, not towards the actual faculty. Administration, basically, the people in charge of running, the camps when you get there on the first day for orientation, trying to recruit college kids to go to their college. Yeah, that's where most of those expenses are going. Administration overhead. Now, as a result, there's a huge student loan crisis for most of millennials my age group and a little bit of Generation Z. It's $1.5 trillion right now as we speak, and increasing. Now, are you going to start your own business or anything when you are in student loan debt? No, because that's too much of a risk. The average student loan debt for a millennial is about 26 grand. That's just the truth of the matter. Now, you want a secure thing. You want a for sure thing to make money. The average business goes under within I think it's like 8.5 businesses. It's a weird decimal. It's in between 8 and 9 businesses within the first year go under. Actually the first 5 years go under. And it keeps subsequently increasing the potential failure rate. So, what this highlights is starting your own business is not a sure way to make money. And if you have a student loan debt that you have to pay off, you're more than likely not going to start your own business. Unfortunately, this creates a catch-22 situation that I described earlier. Most businesses aren't hiring out secure positions anymore. Just not the case. Everything's short-term contracting. So how is someone going to make money? How is anyone of this generation going to be able to pay off their student loan when they're basically in the gig economy? That'll be another video we'll do greater details about. Thank you for following me on this giant thought bubble process. No, but that's literally what happened for our generation and potentially for Generation Z. It's very hard for us to now get into the middle class. What it's shown is that actual social mobility, so an individual's potential to move from the lower class to the middle or even upper class, is at the smallest level it's been in a couple generations. This is something unprecedented for our parents or even our grandparents' generation, but what used to be the historical norm. It's going to be a tricky situation. Now, my personal belief in how we rectify this situation is we need to do a combo of two things that both the left and the right agree on. The right wants to reduce the barriers for business entry, which yes, it needs to be. The left wants wages to be higher and more secure jobs. Yes, that needs to be. There's a way to do that that involves government intervention, because as I stated before, the private sector won't do it. They're a business. They make profit, not a charity. They're not going to do it on their own. So that all ties into this concept idea that government needs to figure out a way to pay back the student loans for people. My advice is, to bring hope to everyone, we need to do a student loan buyback program, because student loan debt is hindering the economy. Which brings us to the next topic, the housing market. This recession impacted a lot of people. That started with the housing bubble and what caused us the giant crash of the recession. We are in a renter economy. It's the truth of the matter. Most millennials rent. Generation Z, you'll probably rent yourself when you get when you get enough money and are old enough to have your own place. Won't really be your own, you'll just be renting it from somebody, but it's a place you can call your own that's not under your parents' roof. Now, we don't have our own equity. We have less equity than our parents, the baby boomers, and well, mine's a baby boomer. If you're Generation Z, your parents would probably be Generation X. So you still have less equity than them, and equity is the amount of actual assets you own. We have less than them. Even at this age, we had less than them. For example, my dad owned his own house when he was my age. I'm nowhere near that, and I probably never will. And as a result, you have a stagnated economy. We're going to see the repercussions of that unless something's addressed. And what's going to have to come from this is actual government intervention. It's going to have to be a student loan buyback program in order to stimulate the economy, so that way individuals in my age group can actually have some extra money to buy a house and stimulate and actually do the things that we're supposed to be doing at the age march, like starting a family, getting married, owning a home, even buying a car. That's almost put out of reach. And I hear from a lot of older people, well, you guys are lazy. No, we have a lot more difficult. You had job security. We don't. We don't make as much money as you did at this age. We have a higher percentage of debt than you did. Now let's try to end this on a happy note, guys. Ending this on a happy note, we need to do a lot of things differently. We need actual intervention to help people out, to help stimulate the economy and get it so that way we can create more jobs. Because basically, if you think about it, if you were to cancel out, say, the entirety of that $1.5 trillion student loan debt, or even half of it, what that does is more people are buying homes, more people would be able to afford to pay their bills. Someone could actually go start their own business because there'd be less risk for them involved, because they wouldn't have to deal with the albatross it is the student loan debt upon their neck. And that would stimulate the economy in so many ways, much more so than what we recently did with the giant tax cuts. Because as again, tax cuts for the top and for big corporations only mean that they're going to do stock buybacks, because there's not as much demand for their product, because people simply don't have the funds. So basically, when they do the stock buybacks, the workers, the actual laborers, are no longer needed. And it's the truth. Workers are no longer needed because they don't need to make the profit. Their labor is not necessary because they're making profit due to their own stock buyback. So labor is expendable and they cut jobs. It's happened historically every time. It actually was one of the many factors that caused a snowball that was the recession of 2008. The Bush tax cuts had a huge portion in it. Alright.